My own father looked me in the eye and said I was an operational risk. Not a disappointment, not a worry, a risk. A liability to be managed and contained. This was 2 days after my brother Julian announced his engagement to Clara Thorne, whose family name is synonymous with old-world shipping and private equity. The Thornes weren't just wealthy, they were a curated institution. And my father, the retired naval commander, saw their arrival as the final, glorious docking of our family name into a harbor of permanence and prestige. My existence, with my ink-stained hands and my head in the clouds, was a rogue wave that could capsize it all. He didn't say I was embarrassing. He said I was incongruent with the desired optics. That was worse. It was a cold, strategic assessment. But he was right about one thing: I was a risk. Just not to the people he thought. The real danger was to the fragile story they were telling about who mattered, and who did not. The fuse was already lit. They just didn't know I was the one who laid it. I have always lived in the negative space of my family's portrait. My brother Julian was the definitive line drawing, confident, clear, destined for the family finance firm. I was the ambiguous wash of background color. Where he saw spreadsheets as a game to win, I saw them as a landscape to wander, finding patterns in the numbers that others called noise. My passion was cartography, but not of land. I mapped forgotten things, the migration patterns of specific bird species through a changing city, the decay rates of different inks on 19th-century ledgers, the emotional sentiment of a neighborhood based on the colors people painted their doors. I made these maps beautiful, intricate works of data art. My family called it a charming deflection from a real career. My mother, an interior designer to the wealthy, would sigh. Kai, the Thornes collect Renaissance miniatures. What will you talk about? The melancholy of urban pigeons. It was a rhetorical question. The answer was, nothing. I was to be silent, or better, absent. The Thorne engagement party was to be held at their estate, Seaglass Manor, on the coast. A week before, I was in my studio, a converted lighthouse keeper's cottage, finishing a commission. It wasn't a map of birds or ink. It was a security and logistics terrain analysis for a discreet, high-value client. The brief was complex. Model every approach to a coastal property, account for tidal schedules, ground density for vehicle weight, line of sight from both land and sea, and overlay it with historical weather patterns for the last 50 years. The client's name was redacted, referred to only as the Compass Rose. The fee was more than I made in 2 years. I lost myself in the work, in the clean logic of vectors and vulnerabilities. It felt like solving a giant, beautiful puzzle. I delivered the final digital folio and a single, physical vellum plot. I received a one-line confirmation: the terrain is now understood. The payment hit my account. I thought that was the end of it. I had no idea I had just memorized the blueprint to my own family's judgment. The call came from Julian. He was uncharacteristically nervous.
Kai.
The party. It's substantial. Clara's father, Alastair Thorne, he's a particular man. Very focused on tradition, on presentation. I waited. Julian sighed. Dad thinks it's best if you observe from a distance this time. No need to put yourself through the stress. The stress. They always framed my exclusion as a protective measure for me. As if the glittering world they coveted was a scalding sun I was too delicate to bear. Observe from where? I asked flatly. The cottage is close to the manor. Maybe you could watch the boats from the cliff path, he said, the solution dawning on him. Be part of the scenery. That's your specialty, right? The line hung between us, heavy with the unsaid. They didn't want the mapmaker in the mansion. They wanted me to stay part of the landscape, unseen and unmentioned. I agreed. Not out of obedience, but out of a sudden, chilling clarity. I needed to see this. The night of the party, I stood on the wind-swept cliff path, the one I had meticulously charted in my report. Below, Seaglass Manor glowed like a staged jewel, tendrils of music and laughter snatched away by the sea wind. Through my old binoculars, I saw them. My father, standing straighter than I'd seen him in years, laughing with a silver-haired man, Alastair Thorne. My mother, a vision in borrowed silk, pointing at something in the gardens. Julian and Clara, the golden centerpiece. They looked like a magazine spread titled, Legacy Secured. I felt a hollow ache, familiar and deep. It was the feeling of being a footnote in someone else's epic. Then I saw the vans. 2 unmarked, boxy vehicles, rolling silently up the service road I had labeled secondary access, low visibility. They stopped at a discreet gate. Men in dark clothing emerged, moving with efficient purpose. Not staff. Their posture was all wrong. A cold spike of recognition shot through me. I knew their movements. I had plotted the most efficient routes from that gate to the manor's utility entrance, the servants' stair, the main hall. My map was being used, but not by the client, I thought. The Compass Rose wasn't a security firm. It was a heist planner. I had sold the architectural key to the manor's vulnerabilities. My beautiful, logical puzzle was a weapon, and it was being deployed right now, against my own family. Panic was a lightning strike, followed by the ice of calculation. I had 2 advantages. I knew the terrain better than anyone alive, and I was the only person outside their script. I couldn't call the police. Explaining my involvement would take too long. I couldn't run to the manor. The main approaches were likely being watched. But I knew a third way. In my analysis, I'd noted an anomaly. A section of the manor's original 18th century seawall, long since blocked off and forgotten, had a structural weakness. It was not a door, but it could be made into one. It led to the old wine cellars. I had dismissed it as irrelevant for modern security. Now it was the only relevant thing in the world. I moved not down the path, but over the cliff edge, using the gorse and rock formations I'd charted for erosion patterns. The sea roared below. My hands found the holds I knew would be there from my geological survey. It was a desperate, vertical scramble in the dark. I reached the narrow ledge where the sea wall met the cliff. The weakness was a disguised sally port, a smuggling door from 2 centuries past, sealed with rotten timber. I kicked, not at the center, but at the point where the timber grain intersected with the corroded iron latch, exactly as my stress diagram had suggested. It gave way with a splintering groan, swallowed by the crash of waves. I was in. The air was cold, emerged from a tapestry-hidden damp stone into a bustling servants' corridor. Chaos hadn't reached here yet. I saw a junior waiter carrying a tray of champagne flutes. Without thinking, I took the tray from him. "I'll take it." "Mr. Thorne needs an urgent word with the sommelier," I said, my voice adopting the flat, commanding tone of my father. The waiter, confused, nodded. I straightened my simple dark sweater, pushed my hair back, and walked into the glittering heart of the party carrying that tray like a shield. The ballroom was a spectacle of curated power. And there, in the center, was my family, orbiting Alastair Thorne. I weaved through the crowd, my eyes scanning. I saw one of the men from the van, now in a server's uniform, his eyes cataloging the jewelry in the room. Another stood by a fire exit, a silent sentinel. They were waiting for a signal. I had to get to Alastair Thorne. I walked directly to their group, interrupting a story my father was telling. He looked at me, and for a second, his face was pure, unvarnished horror. "Kai? What are you?" "Mr. Thorne," I said, my voice clear, placing the tray on a table. "Your security perimeter has been breached. There are at least 6 operatives inside the manor. Their exfiltration route is the service road. They're waiting for the signal, which will likely be the main lights cutting out." The group stared. Alastair Thorne, a man with eyes like flint, looked me up and down. "And who, precisely, are you?" My father went pale. This is Julian's brother, Kai. He's confused." "I apologize." "I'm the cartographer you hired as the Compass Rose," I said, the words hanging in the air. "I mapped every vulnerability in this estate. And the team using my map is here. Right now." The silence was absolute. My father's horror turned to something else, a dawning, terrifying comprehension. Alastair Thorne didn't flinch. He lifted a hand slightly. From the periphery, Two men in tailored suits who had been chatting with guests subtly changed their stance. His personal security. He spoke into his cuff. Grey wall is active. Service road. Interior sweep. Discreet. Then he looked back at me. The Sally Port in the sea wall. Is it viable? It's how I got in, I said. It's their least expected entry, but also their worst escape. It's a choke point. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. A pivot. Good. He gave another quiet order. The ambient lighting in the room dipped once, then returned to full brightness, a prearranged signal. Across the room, I saw the fake waiter's eyes widen. The game was up. What followed was a silent, efficient unraveling. Thorne's security moved like water. The intruders, realizing their plan was compromised, attempted to fade back into their roles, but they were gently, firmly isolated and escorted out. There was no scene, no screams. To most guests, it looked like a few waiters were being rotated out. The music never stopped. After, Alastair Thorne led my family and me to his study, a room lined with actual maritime charts. He poured a brandy and handed it to me first. Your work was exceptional, he said. The detail on the tidal calculus was a work of art. I purchased it for our security review. A leak in my organization turned it into a commodity. You are not at fault. You are, however, responsible for the solution. He turned to my father. Commander, you told me your younger son was a dreamer. You failed to mention he dreams in actionable intelligence. My father had no words. His strategic world had inverted. The risk had become the asset. The incongruent piece had just saved the entire board. The car ride home was silent. The next day, my father came to my cottage. He stood awkwardly among my maps and specimens. Alastair Thorne has offered you a permanent consultancy, he said. He wants you to audit all his properties. I nodded. I know. He called this morning. My father looked at a map on my wall, a swirling, beautiful plot of fox territories in the county. I never understood what you do. I see the connections others miss, I said simply. Sometimes those connections are between animals. Sometimes they're between a door and a danger. He was quiet for a long time. We asked you to observe from a distance, he finally said, his voice rough. You saw everything we were blind to. It wasn't an apology. It was a surrender to a new, undeniable truth. The family myth has been rewritten. I am no longer the unstable element, the operational risk. In the new story, I am the one who reads the terrain. Julian still works in finance, but he now calls me to ask about predictive patterns for coastal property markets. My mother, cautiously, asked if I could map the emotional flow of a living room for a difficult client. My father and I don't talk much, but when we do, it's about logistics and vectors. It's a language he finally understands. The ache of being the footnote is gone, because I am no longer in their book. I am writing my own. And sometimes, their narratives now cross-reference mine. That night on the cliff, I learned the most important cartography of all, the map of your own worth. You are not the landscape others walk over. You are the compass. Your value isn't determined by the crowded, glittering rooms that shut you out. It's forged in the quiet, wind-swept places where you learn to navigate by your own stars. The people who dismiss you as background noise are often deaf to the crucial frequency you alone can hear. Your strange expertise, your incongruent passion, that very thing they tell you to silence, it is your unique lens. It is the tool that can solve puzzles they don't even know exist. If you are standing on your own cliff path right now, watching the party from the outside, know this. Your perspective is not a disadvantage. It is your strategic vantage point. You see the whole board while they're focused on a single square. The distance they try to impose can become your greatest strength. Use it. Study the terrain of your own life with the same meticulous care. Map your talents, your knowledge, your quiet observations. Because one day, that map will be the only thing that can navigate through the crisis, through the facade, and lead you, and maybe even them, to solid ground. Did this story of quiet observation and unexpected strength resonate with you? If you've ever felt overlooked, if your skills have been called a hobby while you knew they were so much more, then you understand the journey. I want to hear about your map. What is the unique terrain you know better than anyone else? Tell me in the comments. And if you want more stories that explore the hidden power in being different, that challenge the idea of where value comes from, then please, give this video a like. That single click tells the Winds of Thought channel that these are the narratives you want to explore. It helps guide what we create next. Your support is the true north for this community. Thank you for listening, for being here, and for mapping your own path.